The customer thought I was just another waitress who couldn't afford to lose her job. He thought my silence was permission. But while he was busy tightening his grip, he didn't notice the little girl sitting at table 4. Her name is Iria, and she doesn't like it when people touch her things. "Excuse me, sir. Why is my new mother crying?" The restaurant went dead silent because standing behind Iria was Kwon Seok-Ryu. And in this city, you don't just apologize to the boss. You pray he doesn't decide your hand is better suited for a trash can. The man at table 4 was a regular, the kind who mistook service for subservience. His hand shot out, clamping around Nyelle's wrist as she tried to refill his cup. "I'm talking to you, sweetheart," he sneered, his grip tightening until her knuckles turned white. "The service today is pathetic. Maybe you need a reason to move a little faster." Nyelle didn't scream. She didn't fight. She froze, her breath hitching. In her mind, she was back in the life she'd fled, where hands were always heavy and no was a dangerous word. "Is she yours?" The voice was small, precise, and cold enough to freeze the air. A girl sat at the adjacent booth, Iria Kwon. She was 7 years old, dressed in a black velvet coat that cost more than the diner's entire inventory. She wasn't looking at the man, she was looking at the way his fingers were bruising Nyelle's skin. "She's just a waitress, kid," the man barked, not letting go. "Go back to your pancakes." "She's not a waitress," Iria said, her eyes shifting to the front door. "She's my mother, and my papa is going to be very cross with you." The bell above the door didn't just ring, it seemed to shatter. Kwon Seok-Ryu stepped inside. He didn't look like a mobster from a movie. He looked like a force of nature in a tailored suit. Behind him, 3 men in grey coats stood like stone pillars, blocking the exit. Seok-Ryu walked past the frightened patrons, his eyes locked on Nyelle. He didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with a terrifying, possessive recognition. "Iria," Seok-Ryu said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, "is this the one?" Iria whispered, sliding out of her booth to stand next to Nyelle. "She has the same eyes, Papa, but he's hurting her." Seok-Ryu reached the table. He didn't yell. He simply leaned over, his shadow swallowing the man in the pinstripe suit. He placed a hand on the table, a hand scarred at the knuckles, steady and heavy. "You have 3 seconds to release my wife." His voice was calm, but the air felt charged with a deadly voltage. "Before I show you exactly what happens to people who touch what belongs to the Kwon family." The man's grip broke instantly. He scrambled back, his chair clattering to the floor. I didn't know. I thought she was just—" "You thought she was alone," Seok-Ryu interrupted. He draped his coat over Nyelle's trembling shoulders. It was warm and smelled of cedar and steel. "She is never alone again." "I've never seen this man in my life. I've never seen this child." But as Seok-Ryu's hand settled firmly on the small of my back, I realized the man I was hiding from was no longer my biggest problem. I had just been claimed by the King of Seoul. The car ride was silent, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air before a big storm. I sat in the back of the sleek black car, still wrapped in the boss's coat. It felt like a shield, but also like a net. Outside the window, the city lights blurred into long lines of neon. I looked at the little girl, Iria, who sat next to me. She hadn't let go of my hand since we left the diner. Her small fingers were cold, but her grip was like iron. We drove through a gate that looked like it belonged to a castle. It was made of thick black metal, and it swung open without a sound. The house was a mountain of white stone and glass, standing tall against the dark sky. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress. When the car door opened, Kwon Seok-Ryu didn't wait for a guard. He reached in and offered me his hand. His palm was rough, and his eyes were unreadable, like deep water at night. "Follow me," he said. His voice was a low rumble that made my chest tight. "And do not be afraid. No one can touch you here." As we walked through the front doors, the hallway opened up into a room with ceilings so high I had to crane my neck to see the top. It was filled with gold trim and marble floors that shone like a mirror. But my breath caught when I saw what was hanging at the end of the hall. It was a painting, a huge portrait in a gold frame. I stopped walking, my heart hammered against my ribs. The woman in the painting was wearing a dress the color of rubies. She had her hair swept back, and she wore a necklace of diamonds that looked like fallen stars. But it wasn't the dress or the jewels that made my blood turn to ice. It was her face. She had my jawline. She had my nose. She had the exact same curve of the lips. It was like looking into a mirror from another lifetime. Her name was Hana, Seok-Ryu whispered, standing so close behind me I could feel the heat from his shadow. She was the heart of this family. She was the only person the Syndicate ever feared. To the world, she was a legend. To Iria, she was everything. I turned to look at him, my voice shaking. "I'm just a waitress. I don't belong in a frame." He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. "You are more than a waitress now, Nyelle. To the men outside these walls, the queen has returned, and for my daughter's sake, you will play the part." Seok-Ryu led me away from the painting and into a large room filled with books. The walls were made of dark wood, and the only light came from a small fire in the corner. He sat behind a heavy desk and pointed to a chair for me. Iria had been taken to her room by a nanny, leaving me alone with the man the whole city feared. He pushed a piece of paper across the desk. It was a contract. "Iria has not spoken a word in over a year," he began, his voice sounding tired for the first time. "Not since the night her mother died. But today, at that diner, she spoke to you. She thinks you are a miracle. She thinks her mother has come back from the stars." I looked at the paper. It said I would receive enough money to change my life forever. It also said I would have to live in the estate and act as his wife in front of everyone. "You want me to lie to her?" I asked, my voice low. "You want me to pretend to be a ghost?" "I want you to keep her alive," he corrected me, his eyes turning cold. "The Syndicate is like a pack of wolves. They think I am weak because I am a single father. If they see that the queen is back, they will stay in the shadows. You will be her shield, and in return I will be yours." He leaned forward, his hands folded on the desk. But you must understand the danger. My enemies will watch your every move. They will look for a reason to prove you are an imposter. If you slip up, if you stop acting like a queen for even a second, they will strike. And they will not just come for me, they will come for you and Iria. I thought about the man at the diner and the way he had grabbed me. Then I thought about the men I was running from, the ones who had made me hide in that diner in the first place. Here I would be a target, but I would have an army behind me. I don't know how to be a queen, I whispered. You don't have to know yet. You just have to survive the first night. Tomorrow the lessons begin. You are no longer Nyelle the waitress. You are the matriarch of the Kwon family. I picked up a pen, my hand trembling. I wasn't just signing for the money. I was signing away my name to save a little girl's voice. The next morning the sun did not feel warm. It shone through the tall windows like a spotlight, and I knew the time for hiding was over. A group of women entered my room. They did not speak. They carried dresses made of silk and boxes of jewelry that glowed with a dangerous light. They took away my old uniform, the stained apron and the cheap shoes that had been my only belongings. The High Council is coming, Seok-Ryu said as he stood by the door. He was watching me, his arms crossed over his chest. They are the older men who helped my father build this empire. They are mean and they are smart. They will try to trip you up. They will ask you questions about things only a queen would know. I sat at a large mirror while the women worked on my hair. They pulled it back tight, making me look older and sharper. They put a necklace around my neck that felt as heavy as a chain. When they were finished, I didn't see the waitress anymore. I saw a stranger with an iron stare. You must not smile, Seok-Ryu told me, his voice firm. Waitresses smile for tips. Queens smile only when they have won. Today you must be cold, you must be silent. Let them wonder what you are thinking. He led me down to the grand dining room. 12 men sat at a long table. They were old, with deep lines on their faces and eyes that looked like they had seen too much blood. The room was so quiet I could hear the tick of the clock on the wall. One of the men, the oldest of the group, stood up. He leaned on a cane and looked at me from head to toe. We heard the news, Seok-Ryu, the old man said, his voice like dry leaves. But we are not children who believe in ghosts. This woman looks like Hana, but is she as strong, or is she just a pretty doll you found in a coffee shop? I felt a surge of fear, but then I felt a small hand slip into mine. Iria had crept into the room and was standing by my side. Her presence gave me a strange kind of courage. I looked at the old man. I didn't look down. I didn't pull away. I am the woman who keeps the peace in this house, and if you want to know if I am strong, you are welcome to test me. But do not forget whose table you are sitting at. The room stayed silent. Seok-Ryu's lips moved just a tiny bit, almost like a smile. I had passed the first test, but I knew the wolves were still hungry. The council members left with their heads bowed, but the tension in the house did not fade. 2 nights later, Seok-Ryu told me we had to attend a meeting with the Han family. They were the biggest rivals to the Kwon Syndicate. "This is not a party," he warned me as we arrived at a quiet, dark restaurant. "This is a map-making session. We are deciding who owns which streets. Stay close to me." I walked into the room wearing a black dress that felt like armor. Iria was at home, safe with her guards, but I still felt her little hand in my mind. We sat across from a man named Mr. Han. He was younger than the council members, with a sharp face and eyes that moved like a snake's. He didn't look at Seok-Ryu, he looked only at me. "So the legend returns," Mr. Han said. He poured a drink, but his hand stopped mid-air. He leaned forward, squinting at a small scar on my wrist, a mark I got long before I ever came to Seoul. His face changed. The smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of pure shock. "You have done a good job, Seok-Ryu," Mr. Han whispered, his voice turning cold. "She looks just like Hana. The hair, the dress, the walk, it is perfect. But I knew the real Hana. I knew her since we were children." My heart skipped a beat. I tried to keep my face still, like stone, just as I had been taught. "Hana had a mole on her left shoulder. This woman does not, but I do know who she is. I saw her face on a most wanted list in the north 3 years ago. She isn't a ghost of your wife, Seok-Ryu. She is the daughter of the man who burned down my father's warehouse." Seok-Ryu's hand tightened on the table until the wood groaned. I felt the air leave the room. I wasn't being recognized as a queen anymore. I was being recognized as the child of a different war. "She is a spy," Mr. Han hissed, reaching for his phone. "You brought the daughter of your enemy into your own house. You didn't find a wife. You found a ticking bomb." I looked at Seok-Ryu. I expected him to be angry or to throw me to the wolves to save himself. Instead, he stood up and stepped in front of me, shielding me from Mr. Han's gaze. "I know exactly who she is, Han," he lied, his voice sounding like rolling thunder. "And if you breathe a word of her past to anyone, I will ensure your family has no future. She is a Kwon now. That is the only name that matters." The world thinks I am a ghost come back to life, but Mr. Han knows the truth. Now we have to step out into the light for the biggest test of all, Iria's birthday. In a world of shadows, a birthday party is never just about cake. It is a trap waiting to be sprung. Is Nyelle a mother, a queen, or a target? Can she protect the girl who gave her a voice when the shooters start to move? If you're ready for the chaos of Chapter 6, Iria's birthday, let's keep going. The garden was filled with white roses and the sound of a string quartet. To anyone else, it looked like a beautiful party for a 7-year-old girl, but to me, every waiter looked like a threat, and every gift felt like it could hold a bomb. "Stay close to Iria," Seok-Ryu whispered as he adjusted his tie. "The Han family is here. They are watching to see if you blink. If you show fear, they win." Iria was glowing in a dress of soft pink silk. She was laughing, a sound that was still new and precious. She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the large birthday cake. "Look, Mama, it has 7 candles." I smiled, but my eyes were scanning the rooftops. I noticed a flicker of light from the balcony of the guest house, the sun reflecting off a piece of glass. It wasn't a camera, it was a scope. "Down!" I screamed, not thinking about my dress or my dignity. I tackled Iria to the grass just as a sharp crack echoed through the air. A glass vase on the table behind us shattered into 1,000 pieces. The music stopped. The screaming started. Seok-Ryu was on his feet in a second, his body blocking us from the balcony. His guards moved like a single machine, drawing their weapons and forming a circle around the three of us. "Get them inside," Seok-Ryu roared. I didn't wait for the guards. I picked Iria up and ran toward the heavy oak doors of the estate. My heart was pounding, but I didn't feel like the scared waitress from the diner. I felt a cold, sharp anger. They had tried to hurt a child on her birthday. They had tried to take away the only light in this dark house. As we reached the safety of the hallway, Iria looked up at me. She wasn't crying. She was looking at the dirt on my silk dress and the scratch on my arm. "You saved me," she whispered. "I will always save you," I promised, clutching her tight. I looked back through the glass doors. Seok-Ryu was standing in the middle of the garden, alone, looking up at the balcony. He looked like a god of war. I knew then that the peace was over. The blood debt was about to be paid. The house was under lockdown. The white roses in the garden were crushed, and the silence inside the estate felt like a heavy blanket. Ilia was finally asleep, exhausted from the fear of the afternoon. I sat in the small library, trying to clean the grass stains from my dress when the door swung open. Seok-Ryu didn't look like a boss anymore. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. He wasn't holding a drink or a weapon. He was holding a thin, yellowed file with a name on the front that made my breath stop. Project Ardent. "I spent the last 3 hours digging," Seok-Ryu said. His voice was deeper and slower than usual. He sat across from me, the desk between us feeling like a canyon. "I thought you were just the daughter of a fallen rival. I thought you were hiding from a simple blood debt." I looked down at my hands. The truth was bubbling up, and I couldn't keep it down anymore. "You weren't hiding from the Han family, Nyelle," he continued, his eyes searching mine. "And you weren't just a waitress. This file says you were a special asset. You were trained from the age of 10 to be a human recorder. You can remember every face, every word, and every secret you've ever heard." "That's why you were at the diner," I whispered. The secret felt like a stone in my throat. I wasn't just hiding. I was carrying the names of every crooked politician and police chief in this city. My father didn't burn a warehouse. He stole the Syndicate's digital ledger and put it in the only place they couldn't hack, my head. I looked up at him, my eyes filling with tears. If I smile, it's because I'm trying to forget. If I stay silent, it's because the voices of 1,000 dead men are screaming in my mind. I am a living bomb, Seok-Ryu. Anyone who stands near me gets burned. Seok-Ryu stood up and walked around the desk. I expected him to push the file toward me and tell me to leave. I expected him to be afraid of the target on my back. Instead, he reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. It was the first time he had touched me without an audience watching. "They want the ledger, but they have to go through a king to get to the queen. You aren't a special asset in this house, Nyelle. You are the woman who saved my daughter, and I don't care what secrets you have in your head. I only care about the heart that beats under them." He leaned in, his forehead almost touching mine. The men who made you are coming. I can feel them in the wind. But this time you aren't running. We are going to use those secrets to bury them once and for all." The night was cold and sharp as we pulled up to the abandoned shipping dock. This was the place where my old life and my new one would finally meet. The man waiting for us was Director Vane, the person who had turned my childhood into a living record. He stood under a single flickering light, surrounded by men in dark tactical gear. "Nyelle," Vane called out, his voice thin and cold. "You've led us on quite a chase, but even a queen has to return to her owner eventually. Give us the ledger, and maybe we'll let the boss and the girl live." I stepped out of the car. I didn't feel like the girl who had spent months washing dishes and hiding in the shadows. I wore a long black coat, and my head was held high. Behind me, the doors of 4 black SUVs opened at the exact same time. 60 of Seok-Ryu's best men stepped out, their heavy boots thudding against the concrete like a drum. "She isn't a ledger," Seok-Ryu said, stepping up beside me. He didn't look at Vane, he looked at the men behind him, his eyes daring them to move. "And she certainly doesn't have an owner." I walked forward until I was only a few feet away from Vane. I could see the fear in his eyes. He realized that for the first time I wasn't alone. I had a king at my back and an army at my side. "You want the secrets, Director?" I asked, my voice steady as a mountain. "I remember the night you sold out the city council. I remember the bank account numbers you used to hide the money. I remember the names of the 3 men you had removed to keep your seat. I remember everything." Vane's face went pale. "You wouldn't dare. If that information goes public, you'll be hunted by everyone on that list." "Then I'll be hunted," I replied. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote. Seok-Ryu has already set the upload to start. If I don't enter a code in the next 5 minutes, every secret in my head goes to every news station in the country. Vane looked at the men around him, but they were looking at the Kwon guards. They knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. The power he had over me for 20 years was gone. It had turned into dust. "This is your only chance," Seok-Ryu growled, stepping into the light. "Take your men and disappear. If I ever see your face again, I won't need a ledger to end you." Vane looked at me one last time, his mouth twitching with rage, but he knew he had lost. He turned around and signaled for his men to retreat into the darkness. As their trucks sped away, the heavy weight that had been on my chest for years finally lifted. I was no longer a special asset. I was just Nyelle. The morning after the docks was the quietest I had ever known. The sun rose over the estate, turning the white stone to gold. The files were gone, the men who hunted me were in hiding, and for the first time in my life, my mind felt like it belonged to me. I stood in the grand hallway, staring at the portrait of Hana. I didn't look like a stranger to her anymore. I looked like a survivor. I had my old suitcase packed. It was light, just a few things I had bought with my own money. The contract was sitting on the desk in the library, signed and finished. I had done what I promised. I had saved the girl's voice, and I had cleared the boss's path. "The car is ready," Seok-Ryu said, leaning against the doorframe. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, his sleeves were rolled up, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept. "You are free, Nyelle. The money is in your account. You can go back to Chicago or anywhere else the wind takes you. No one will ever follow you again." I looked at the suitcase, then back at him. Is that what you want?" Before he could answer, the sound of small running feet filled the hall. Iria skidded to a stop between us. She wasn't wearing her silk dresses or her velvet coats. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and had a smear of chocolate on her cheek. She looked at my suitcase and her eyes filled with tears. "Mama," she whispered. It wasn't the voice of a miracle or a legend. It was just a little girl who didn't want to be alone again. I knelt down and pulled her into a hug. I realized then that I didn't want the quiet life in Chicago. I didn't want to be a ghost in a diner. I wanted the noise of this house. I wanted the weight of the crown. I wanted the man who stood by me when the world was on fire. I stood up and looked at Seok-Ryu. I reached out and tore the contract into 2 pieces, letting the paper fall to the floor like snow. "The waitress is gone," I said, my voice strong and sure, "and the asset is dead. But the matriarch, she thinks she'll stay for breakfast." Seok-Ryu didn't say anything. He just stepped forward and took my hand, his grip warm and protective. We weren't a contract anymore. We were a family. Nyelle Ardent survived the diner, the syndicate, and her own dark past to find a home she never expected. From a nameless waitress to the most powerful woman in Seoul, her journey shows that the strongest shield is the love of a family. Would you have stayed in the palace or taken the money and run? If you loved this 9-part journey, smash that like button, leave a comment with the word Queen, and subscribe so you never miss our next viral story. Thanks for watching.